record. It's 7 o'clock. Right at 7:01, I will go ahead and get started. Looks like we still got some folks entering the Zoom room. Hello and welcome, everybody. We are so glad you chose to hang out with us tonight. Okay, it is 7:01, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to just quickly introduce myself and get on out of the way so I can make room for our expert this evening. But hello and welcome, everybody. My name is Amy Combs, and I'm the Executive Director here at ECAC, the Exceptional Children's Assistance Center. And it is my absolute pleasure to be able to host Dr. Beth McLean, who is with the National Center on Improving Literacy. She's going to be doing a presentation for us this evening on the skills needed for children to learn to read. And so certainly literacy is something that comes up as a concern quite often from the families that we hear from. So we're really excited to roll out a series that Beth is going to be doing for us over the next couple months. And so I will be monitoring the chat and the Q&A. That is how you can communicate with us. We won't be able to unmute you or put you on camera, but you can certainly utilize the chat and the Q&A. And I will probably refer most questions to Beth because this is her wheelhouse, but certainly will answer what I can. We are going to record this. We'll make the recording available on our YouTube channel. We are going to be sending out a follow-up email with resources to all of the attendees. And so I'm going to mute myself and I'm going to let Beth take the wheel.
Good evening. Welcome everyone to this training. The overarching title is Learning About Your Children's Reading Development. As Amy said, this is through the National Center on Improving Literacy, which is the first slide. Just to explain, the mission is to increase access to, use of evidence-based approaches to screen, identify, and teach students with literacy-related disabilities, including dyslexia. But what we're doing today and in the next couple of months is to learn about your child's reading development. Because what we know is children who struggle learning early literacy skills are at risk for reading and academic difficulties later. So being informed about the parts of literacy, how children learn to read, and why they might struggle can help you make better decisions for your child's education. And a lot of this is just that learning all the pieces of what goes on because so much is happening in school about how children learn to read. Okay. As I said, this is a series on key roles that families can play for children's literacy success. So our objectives for workshop number 1 is to learn the evidence-based information on the skills needed to learn to read and to learn how to interact with children in ways that support and monitor their language and reading development. Okay, so those are the 2 objectives for this workshop. The agenda for the 4 workshops, or the titles of them actually, is this: tonight is going to be skills needed to learn to read. Then we're going to learn about how reading typically develops, which is in March, why children might struggle to read, which is in April, and signs of risks for reading difficulties, which is in May. So all 4 of these workshops are work together, and I think the knowledge builds on each other. So this is kind of the foundation. Not that you can't attend the others if you didn't attend them all, but it just kind of gives an idea of the foundations and why if you don't have the foundations, it might lead to why kids might struggle to read. So, okay, here's a title page, which we always love. So reading involves many different skills that must be taught to your child. And when you're learning these skills, they don't come naturally. One would think that you can easily, reading is just something that we all just absorb, but you actually, like learning to play a sport or learning arithmetic, you have to take practice to master the skills of reading. So explicit instruction is really important, particularly for phonological awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension. And all these occur in school, and it's necessary for your children to learn to read. But part of what the message I'm trying to give across is that you need to be a partner in your children's learning and skill development and learning to read, because the schools do one thing, and then you kind of are there behind as an advocate and to help children practice the reading skills that they need, that they have learned at school. And that's the really important part, is the partnership. Okay, so this is the first. What is reading? So reading is a complex system of making meaning from print that requires many skills. So reading involves successfully knowing the correct word in reading, which is accuracy and fluency, and understanding material read, which is the meaning. And this is called the simple view of reading. Now, Amy's going to put a resource in the chat for the handout that's produced by the National Center on Improving Literacy about the simple view of reading. So what you see here is the page, the graphic that's on the last page of the handout. But it kind of shows that the explicit and systematic instruction in the skills is needed to read accurately, fluency, and with meaning to become a skilled reader. And so we're going to discuss all of these skills in the upcoming slides. But as you can see, from the first one, seeing each letter but not knowing what sounds these letters represents, and you can't get any meaning from the little dog bark, from all those jumbled of letters together. And then when the sounds and the letters begin to make sense, and but it still takes a lot of effort to read. And that's, you can see, like cat and dog. And then finally, putting the individual sounds together easily to produce each word, and you finally get the grasp of the meaning. So when you have a chance, review the content of the handout, because I think it'll help give you a better idea of, what is reading. Okay, and next we're going to listen to a video. I get to it. Here we are. This is Dr. Reedline discusses the process of reading, and here he goes.
It's hard to say. If you ask yourself whether or not reading skills are more limited today than 40 years ago, it's tough to answer that question. For example, whether there's an epidemic at this point in time. What we do know is that 40 years ago, kids had many more options if they did not acquire reading skills well. There were many more vocational and occupational kinds of tracks people could go to. We can't make the comparisons because the types of data that we would need to do so just aren't available. What we do know is that in this time, reading is critical. It's much more critical because of the internet. It's much more critical to make a living. You see a lot of kids, individual differences in kids as they come into the early grades and even preschool and kindergarten on their development of these basic capabilities. Some teachers will say, well, you don't have to teach all of these skills because I got quite a few kids who seem to know them just on their own. It does appear natural. When we study those children and then go back and study what they did at home, we find that their parents were very good teachers. These are not naturally acquired skills. Reading is a skill. It's like piano playing. It's like tennis. It's like anything that incorporates a number of different subcomponents. The upshot is parents can be extraordinarily good teachers and provide a number of foundational skills that lead teachers sometimes to think that it is a natural process. It's not taught, it's just inherent. That's not true. Reading is not natural. I can't stress this enough. If reading were natural, why are there so many oral language using cultures on the planet who have not yet developed a written language? And if reading were natural, why are there so many young kids from poverty who yet have not acquired the skill in some way? Teachers have to be accountable for what they do in their classrooms and with children. They don't have any control over the background circumstances for that child. They don't have any control, typically, over the home life and the interactions at home once that kid leaves the classroom. What they do have control over is knowing their stuff, stuffing kids every day with that, and making sure that they're assessing as they go along in a systematic fashion so that they know the effects of what they're doing on that youngster's development and behavior. They are accountable for that. And unfortunately, even though the world is going to revolve around that classroom and do things that she or he has no control over, she does have control over what she knows, how she applies it, how she measures its effectiveness, and how the kids end up. It is accountability. Tough word, but we have to be accountable.
Major funding for Reading Rockets comes from the United States Department of Education.
Okay.
Office of...
Okay, I'm going to go back to that. I don't want him to start, though. Okay. Oops, so sorry. Okay. All right, just getting the hang of all this. Anyway, so that was kind of a primer of kind of what I've been saying, is that reading is not a natural thing. It is something that does need to be taught. And teachers do need to be accountable, but I think the partnership between parents and teachers is also equally important to be able to support the teachers in what is being taught in the classroom. And sometimes I think we, as parents just say, well, it's all being taught in school, I don't need to worry about it. But I think being there and helping your child practice learning to read and to write and to speak in the vocabulary will really provide the skills needed to be good readers and writers. Okay. So these are skills needed to read, and these are just the overarching skills. So it's the spoken language and the written language. So to write and read words correctly and with understanding, they need to develop the key skills at an early age. Okay, and that is the foundation of the foundation of reading and writing is based on the interaction between these two skills, the spoken language and the written language. Okay. Language can be spoken and heard or written and read, and strong language skills build a better foundation for that learning to read and write. And so right now we're going to go into a little more detail about what it means for the parts of the spoken language, and then we'll go into the written language, and then we'll have a better idea of what those foundational skills are. So spoken language is understanding and using sounds, words, ideas from speaking and listening. Okay, you can use and talk about sounds, vocabulary, and grammar with your child, and they can experience listening and speaking, and this will improve their language skills. If a child has limited experience or difficulties with speech, language, and communication skills can interfere with learning to read. And that's important to note, is that if there are difficulties going on, and that's where you, as a parent, you know your child the best, is whether they're having some difficulties. Okay. So video of how to help your child develop spoken language. All right. I think I just pushed that. Yes.
Kids can handle more than we think when it comes to vocabulary. When talking with kids, we often use words we know they'll understand, but it's easier than you think to teach them new words. And expanding their vocabulary is key to becoming a stronger reader. Try using more descriptive words when talking with young children. When you catch yourself saying, "Please give me that," try saying, "Please hand the picture to mommy."
Okay. So, oh God, I don't know how to run my own thing here. Okay. So when you're talking to your child, you want to expand upon what they're saying, because when you expand upon what they're saying, you're increasing the vocabulary. And again, we're going to go through this in a minute, but vocabulary is part, if they don't have the words, they're not going to understand what's being read or what's being said. So it's important to do that. So if someone says, "Please put your clothes away," what could you say? You might be able to say, "Please put your clothes away in the laundry basket, in the hamper, in the closet." So you expand upon it so that more words are being used. It looks like you're feeling mad. And you could say, "It looks like you're feeling angry or upset or bothered about something." So it's important to kind of just go further than what the child says so that there's expansion of the vocabulary. Because this is the only way they're going to, and especially if it's in a context of where you are with them, and so they can apply, see the word, and know what the word means when they're doing something. Okay, so written language. So we had spoken language and written language. These are the two big ones. It's understanding and using sounds, words, and ideas from reading and writing. And there is a clear relationship between spoken and written language. And this relationship is stressed in the simple view of reading, which was the first handout link that was provided. So once your child can read printed words, he or she applies the same skills used to understand spoken words to understand what is being read. So it's the two skills work together. Okay, so what are the parts of the spoken language? I'm going to go, so first of all is phonological awareness. And that's one part of spoken language. And it's the ability to recognize that spoken words are made up of individual parts, including individual sounds called phonemes. And this is the foundation for language and literacy development. Now, phonemic awareness is a piece of phonological awareness. It's kind of under the umbrella, if you can see from that picture there, which is a handout, and Amy's going to put in the chat. But it's the ability to identify and play with individual sounds in spoken words. Okay. This handout shows the umbrella, which is kind of interesting. So on the left side, you have word level. So it's the rhyming, it's the alliteration, which is like big brown bear, sentence segmentation. And then next is the syllable level, which is, being able to break, words into 1 or 2 syllables, 3 syllables. Then there's onset and rhyme, which is all within the umbrella of phonological awareness, because it all has to do with the sounds. The spoken words are made up of individual sound parts. And then there's phonemic awareness, which, like we said, was the individual ability to identify and play with individual sounds in spoken words. So if you look at if you can see the picture, it says, moon has 3 phonemes. So that's the 3 sounds that are within that word. Okay. But that is an umbrella. And sometimes it can be mixed up if you read things that people kind of call phonemic awareness, phonological awareness, and they use them interchangeably, but they should not be. Phonemic awareness is under the umbrella of phonological awareness because it's a part of that. But to read and spell, your child must understand how language works so he can read the words later. So any child with reading difficulties develop phonological awareness slower than typical readers. And this is particularly true of dyslexia, and we'll get to that in future training. But as they get older, the need for phonological awareness instruction typically lessens unless they continue to struggle with these skills. Okay, but phonological awareness, similar to learning to read, is not a natural process. It has to be explicitly taught to young children so that they understand, they can recognize the sounds of words that are made up of individual parts. Okay, so the handout went in there. All right. And you're going to get this handout, the slides. So whenever you see this little backpack, it will send you to the link of that handout that we've talked about on this particular slide. And I forgot to mention, and I said I would do it, I developed a glossary of the terms that we're using throughout this whole training. And excuse me, Amy will send it out to you when she does the follow-up email about everything. But it's kind of it'll also help for any kind of if you go to parent-teacher conferences or you have questions, you'll have the words in front of you to be able to ask the questions about, especially when a teacher may send information back and you're like, well, I don't know what that word means. Hopefully it'll be on the glossary and you can then have an understanding to be able to talk with the teacher better. Sorry, that was a little digression, but I just remembered the glossary. So, okay.
Beth,
yes.
I'm going to interrupt you for a quick second because I'm having my own issues. I strategically placed all 5 links in my chat with you before we got started, but it seems to only want to let me paste the very last one. So the first handout that I was supposed to paste was the learning to read, the simple view of reading. That didn't go in correctly, so I'm going to do that right now, folks. So sorry about that. I'm glad somebody said in the chat I got the right one. I just put the right one in for the phonemic awareness, and now I'm going to go. The one that it's been putting in the chat, folks, is the one that was supposed to be last. So sorry about that, but thank you for bringing that to my attention. I'm going to fix it right now.
Okay, so I can put them in the chat too. I've realized in my notes I have them, so you let me know if there's any issues. Okay. Okay. Okay, so yes, so it's important to know the distinction between the two, and it needs to be explicitly taught. That was my little summary there. Okay, so here's a really brief video that shows how effective phonemic awareness instruction looks like.
What is is phonemic awareness. This is the key to learning to read. It is the ability to hear, identify, and play with sounds and words. When children can identify sounds, this will help them when they begin to read. Phonemic awareness is the realization that within a word are individual sounds, or phonemes. Just to be clear, phonics focuses on teaching sound-spelling relationships and is associated with print. Phonemic awareness tasks are oral. Sometimes kids leave off the ending sound to words, like, "Mom, I hurt my hand," instead of hand. Have a pile of items, like Legos, and sit at a table. Each time they hear a sound in a word, have them put a Lego on the table.
What's the first sound you hear when the word back? Good, good. Now, what's the second sound you hear in back? Ah, good job. And what is the last sound you hear in back? Great, good job.
They can go back and touch each Lego to repeat b-a-k, then say back.
Okay, so that video kind of gives an idea. It's a fun game to do. You can do it in many different ways, but it's a good way to practice the phonemic awareness. Okay, so we had the phonological awareness, which had the phonemic underneath it. Then another piece of spoken language is vocabulary. And this is knowing what a word means, and how to say and use them correctly. Your child must understand the meaning of words, of phrases and ideas, and how to say and use them correctly. You can learn vocabulary in two ways. One, by hearing and seeing words as you listen and talks and reads, and directly by adults teaching the meaning of words and word parts. Okay, so often before a child can read, your child often learns the meaning of words, phrases, and ideas in books read aloud by listening to and talking about them. For example, when you have the word hot, means and what their other words could be similar, like sizzle and sultry and sweltering. So your child will also use word parts and their meanings or morphology to understand words mean. Okay, so morphology, that will be on the vocabulary list, but it's the prefix, base, and suffix of words. Okay, so when you think about it, you have the word friend. If I add an S to friend, then it makes it plural. So I have more than one friend. If I add an ly to friend, then it becomes friendly, and the meaning changes to acting like a friend. When I put the prefix, in the beginning of friendly, the word changes to unfriendly, and so does its meaning. So it's not friendly. So these sort of morphology and teaching the prefix and suffixes and the base allows a child to be able to, it helps them decode words, because if they understand what these parts are, then they can make can decode the word to know what the meaning is as they're reading. So, okay. So another vocabulary about how helping your child with vocabulary.
Tier 1 words are words that kids often show up to kindergarten already knowing, like baby, father, jump, and birthday. They're words that are used in everyday conversation, so the meanings of these words don't have to be taught. Tier 2 words, however, need to be taught in order to strengthen a child's comprehension skills. These are words like remorse or tend. When you come across these words in a story, think of these as teachable moments.
So the rabbit felt remorse for what he had done. Do you know what the word remorse means? He felt badly, and he wished he had been nicer to the frog. Can you say the word remorse?
Remorse.
That's good. Has there ever been a time where you felt remorse, maybe? Felt really bad or guilty for something you've done?
Yeah, when I didn't let Jessica play with the ball.
Yeah, it's okay.
Instead of replacing remorse with bad so that your child understands, teach them the meaning of remorse. By doing this, you're helping your child say the word and then use the word in their own context, so it becomes familiar to them and helps grow their vocabulary.
I think that's a really good example as well of reading, quality of reading versus quantity of reading. So there's a lot of quality of reading in that example where she asked questions, the mom did. She asked questions about vocabulary. She related it back to something that would be meaningful to the child. So that also helps comprehension so she can remember it. So it's always good to be asking questions as you're reading. That's kind of an aside there, but it's important to do that. Okay. So we have the spoken language, phonological awareness, which had phonemic awareness under the umbrella, vocabulary, which had morphology to help with the spoken language. And then there's listening comprehension. And this is the ability to understand what others read and say to you. So before your child can read, she often makes sense of the books read aloud to her by listening to and talking about the sounds, letters, and words and ideas she hears. And so when the children, remember, when you read to your child and they're in birth to 3 or 4, they're just listening to the story. And that can be a lot of listening comprehension or a lot of listening, and the vocabulary can be learned. And so that's another really important part of learning to read and a part of the spoken language. So the vocabulary, knowledge of the world are closely linked with listening comprehension. So if you know about the world, you're better able to understand what is being read to you. Okay. Are there any questions at this point? I've kind of covered spoken language. Do you see anything, Amy?
No, I was just going to ask you, at what point did you want me to put the alphabetic principle from phonological awareness handout in yet? Did I miss that opportunity? No. I'm right on time?
Nope,
okay, good.
You did not miss that opportunity.
Okay, good. Okay.
Exciting. Yes. I will tell you. Yeah, it's coming up though. So there are no questions, just keep going forward. Okay.
Yes, I saw that one person has raised her hand a couple times, but I sent her a private chat to say, please use the chat or the Q&A to communicate with us.
Okay. Yes, just ask the question in the chat and we'll go with it from there. Okay. So we've covered spoken language, like I said, and now we're moving on to the written language piece. And one part of written language is print awareness. And this is knowing about print and books and how they are used. Children who know about print understand that the words they see in print and the words they speak and hear are related. I would also say that print awareness is knowing that books covers, it goes from front to back, and reading a sentence goes to left to right. So there's different parts of print awareness for learning to read and being able to understand things. Alphabet knowledge is the ability to name letters and know their sounds. It's to name the 26 letters in the English alphabet and know what their sounds are. Children who go to kindergarten, knowing and writing the alphabet, have an easier time learning to read. And if we think back to what our first video, Dr. Lyon was talking about, there are a lot of kids who come to kindergarten who already know all their alphabet letters because the parents were really involved in it. And the kids who don't know their alphabet letters do tend to fall behind a little bit. And it's hard. They can catch up, but there's always those kids. The other kids are always moving forward and they're always playing catch up with what's going on. So it's really, really important to provide that the knowledge before entering kindergarten. And often they get it in preschool or daycare, and there's a lot of learning there. But again, the parents can reinforce it, can talk about it at home, can read books about the letters of the alphabet for recognition and things like that. All right. So here's an idea how to help your child with letters and sounds. Now, it's important to know that pronouncing letters can vary by region of the United States. But it's important to know how to make letter sounds correctly, because often people might add an extra syllable, which can lead to discoding problems. So it's important to listen and learn the sounds correctly so that they can understand it and things. And it can be a dialect and what's happening, but it's still important to know what the sounds of the words actually are.
Kids must learn the names of the letters of the alphabet and the sounds of the letters. When they understand the connection between letters and their sounds, then they will begin to understand that letters put together form words. This is the very foundation of reading. What sound does each letter make? Point out letters when you see them at the grocery store on signs, on junk mail at home, or the letters we see in our names. What sound do you hear at the beginning of boat? B, b, b. Practice this each time you ride in the car together. Tell your child words and have them make the beginning sound they hear. Then tell you the matching letter.
That is absolutely true. A lot of my work is with family literacy programs, and one of the things we talk about is when parents and children work and interact together. And one thing that I always say is, use your everyday natural interactions you have with your child to teach the letters, to learn what the letters are, to learn the letter sounds at the grocery store, while you're driving a car, while you're on the bus, whatever it might be. And a lot of this is environmental print, which is really important. Way to help kids learn, because we have stop signs, you have so many letters and things on at the grocery store or any stores that you go to. If you know a word, you can say, if you see a green pepper, you can say, okay, it's green, and talk about it that way. But it's important to do it they talk about your junk mail at home in this video, or grocery store. It's really important to try to make it as natural as possible, and things like that. So it just helps the learning process, because it's contextual. All right. Okay, so continuing with print, or with written language. So we had print awareness, knowing about print and books and how they are used, which we just talked about. And then there's phonics. Now, phonics is taught, and we heard about phonics in school and things like that. And it's important. It's the process of using letter-sound relationships to read and spell words. And it's phonics instruction helps your children learn the alphabetic principle, okay? And that's the understanding that letters match individual sounds and words. Okay, so the alphabetic principle is the sounds, and we talked a minute ago about alphabetic knowledge. It's knowing the alphabet is 26 letters in the English alphabet, and knowing and learning their sounds. So it's important to know the alphabetic principle versus alphabetic knowledge. And that, again, both those terms will be on the glossary that's going to be sent out. Okay. So to read and spell, your child must understand that words are made of letters, that letters represent sounds we hear in speech, and that you use these letter sound connections to sound out or decode words, or encode or write words. Okay, so it's important that's why this phonics instruction is important. Children with reading difficulties may develop word reading skills slower than typical readers. So as your childs get older, the need for the phonics instruction lessens, unless they continue to struggle with learning these skills. But phonics instructions happens in the early grades, and it is an important process, even though I think, it's a lot of things have been said about phonics, but it is important to understand that letter-sound relationship for learning to read. So here, Amy, is the first one we're going to hand out, which is the alphabetic principle linking sounds to letters. That's the link, I believe it is. So I'm going to talk a little bit about it. This particular article discusses the need for explicit instruction to teach phonological awareness. Okay, so what you can do, linking sounds to letters. You recognize and manipulate the sounds of speech, such as individual words in a sentence, syllables within words, first and last sounds of words. So if you remember from many slides back, we talked about phonological awareness in that umbrella. We talked about all those things: onset and rhyme, syllables, phonemic awareness, so all those things were there. Then you teach the letter sound relations as an a in bat versus was. And you can teach the first sound, first teach the sound of the letter, then introduce the syllable. And you can use pictures for targeting these sounds, if that helps, like a and apple. And then you teach students to manipulate letter sounds in print, such as manipulating tiles or magnets, practicing spelling, reading words using the letter sound relations. And if you have a Scrabble board at home, that's a lot of different letters to be able to use, and you can do the morphology, the prefixes and the suffixes, and practice learning words that way, and manipulate the letter sounds in print as well. So there's both ways to do that. Okay, so that's the first handout. And then the next handout is the alphabetic principle from phonological awareness to reading words. All right, that's number 4. And again, all these handouts, I'm barely going over them. So please take them home, or please print them out and read them, or read them on your computer, because they have a lot of really great information that would help your knowledge of how this all of the skills. So this one discusses the alphabetic principle, or connecting letters with their sounds to read and write. And again, it's critical for understanding the meaning of text. And at the back of this one, there's a nice graphic that describes this whole principle, and it's 2 pages of graphic. So please review that, and you'll get an idea of how they're connected and what they're doing. Okay. Any questions so far? Or are we good? Okay, we're good. Okay. All right. And again, these 2 backpacks on here, well, I can do it over here. The backpacks are for you to access it when you get the PowerPoint, if you don't take them from the chat. Okay, so here's how you can support your child in phonics. This is a really quick video for doing that.
Learn to read short words. Grab a blank piece of paper. Write 2 or 3 letter words like hat, top, or it. Draw a line under it. Draw a dot under each letter. Then practice reading the word while sliding your finger under each letter, dot to dot. Practice reading it slowly and quickly.
That's a great way to do it. My daughter, when she was in kindergarten, she's now 25, I think my son too, for that matter, they had little brown like puff balls, and they were called meatballs, and they would use the meatballs and slide them across the letters, as they were learning to read. But those meatballs were super important to them. So it's a kind of a way to make it a little more fun too, in that way. So you can get an object to do it as well. Okay. So we had print awareness, and we had the phonics, and now it's reading comprehension, and that's the ability to understand what you are, what is read, what you are read. That's not written very well. What you read. So as a reader, your child applies many of the same skills she uses while listening to books, and makes sense of ones that she's reading. And this is called reading comprehension, or the ability to understand what you're reading. As children progress with the skills, their reading comprehension also will improve. And when she writes about what she reads as well, the reading comprehension. And there's so many ways to increase the reading comprehension. A lot of it is just reading with your child, reading aloud for the fluency and things. But we're going to get to that. And, it seems like a lot of videos, but I actually cut some. So I just want you to know. But this video helps you learn what effective vocabulary and comprehension instruction look like. I think the videos provide a really good example of real life ways to teach things. Here we go.
We want children to be making meaning from all the books and stories they are reading. As they read more and more on their own, we want to make sure they are developing skills to deepen their comprehension. We can check this by asking some questions before, during, and after reading. Before, while reading the title and looking at the cover, ask your child, does this story seem to remind you of anything you've ever seen in your own life? During, while reading the story, check in to see if they're getting the gist of the text. Can you tell me what that means? After, when they've reached the end of the story, have them think back on it. What are some interesting facts from that story? Does this remind you of another story you've read? Activating kids thinking about a story before they read, checking in with them as they read, and reflecting back after they read is a powerful strategy to help kids build meaning from the text they read.
Yes, that is absolutely true. I mean, the video really captures everything. It's the before, during, and after piece. It's not just quickly opening the book and reading through it quickly. just to get, I'm reading to my child, but no, it's way more. It's what I mentioned earlier, the quality versus the quantity of reading books. It's better to take a long time on one book, ask lots of questions, reflect back on their, how it relates to their own life, talk about different words, tier 2, tier 1 words, have them, figure out, look at the pictures, what do they think could be seen? You see the cover, what do you think the story's about too? And there are other ways if you want to get them to thinking about the story, which are books that I really enjoy, are wordless picture books, which we're learning about the words, but this is also a way to help listening comprehension, where they can start really talking and having a conversation about lots of vocabulary as they create their own story within from the pictures that they're reading through it. So it's really, really a powerful way to learn to read. And especially if it's with families who have struggling with English or with learning and all of that, then they can still going through the conversations and learning the vocabulary without actually feeling stressed about reading the words. So they're really good. But remember, the before, during, and after are really important, easy things to think about when you're reading with books with your kids. Okay, so we've talked about spoken language and written language, and fluency is the ability to read words and reading material correctly with enough speed, rate, and expression. And spoken and written language interact through the skill of fluency, and that's how they all come together, okay? So it's all of these things. It's meaning reading the material correctly with enough speed so it's not painful reading, and you're reading with expression, so you're reading as if you're, like kind of like you're talking, where it's not just monotone, in other words. So, but to do this, your child has to learn to read correctly and quickly and apply all of his or her spoken and written language skills, all the things we've been talking about this evening. Reading connected text daily, like phrases, sentences, passages, is important to build fluency skills. If your fluent word reading is helped by your child's knowledge of both vocabulary and grammar, and reading fluently allows time for making sense of what is being read. Beginning readers do not read fluently. They're struggling to decode, figure out the words and what they're doing. And while they're figuring out the words, there's so much of their brain is being taken up with that they're not able to understand, and comprehend what they're reading. Okay, so a proficient reader is automatic. It's an automatic process with each component, your skill, the phonological awareness, decoding, vocabulary. They're all part of the process, and they're all part of the skills that naturally come since they've been taught, and they can construct the meaning from the text. So over time, fluency gets better and better. And if there's, fluency is something that the child is struggling with, then that is something to become aware of and start thinking about. And we'll go over that in greater detail in one of the future trainings. But as I said, fluent readers, it frees up, the cognitive processes and resources to better process the meaning of the words. So you will be able to read fluently. Okay. And that's important. Fluency is kind of the bridge between the two. All right. So this video shows how to help your child with fluency.
Fluency is being able to read words and stories easily, quickly, and correctly. Kids who can read accurately, quickly, and with expression will have a much easier time understanding what they've read because they won't be stuck on sounding out words. There are 3 ways to enhance fluency skills: echo reading, partner reading, and repeated reading. Echo reading.
I'm gonna read the line first, and then you're gonna repeat after me, okay? The man across the way was tuning a guitar.
The man across the way was tuning a guitar.
Yes.
Partner reading. This gives parents the chance to model good fluency or smooth reading for their child. It also gives them the opportunity to listen to their child read and offer helpful feedback.
The library opens at 9 o'clock, but Lola is ready to go long before then.
The librarian buzzes them through the machine.
Repeated reading. This is when a kid reads the same paragraph or page over and over again, reading more smoothly and with more expression each time.
Now the moment had come to launch the boat. Would it float? It did.
Okay. That's great, but let me stop you for a second. When you read, you want to sound like you're talking, like when we talk to each other, right? So say it more like you're talking, like, now the moment had come to launch the boat. Would it float? It did. You try.
Now the moment had come to launch the boat. Would it float? It did.
Good job.
Okay, so that provides some really good examples of just practicing fluency and the 3 different ways to do it, which is all 3 can be used, 1 can be used, but they're all really very helpful. Okay, so the next, this is the final handout that came first, but now I'll have it again, or you could just go back to the first one that was sent. But this is ways you can help set the stage for your child's learning and reading success. And basically, as I've said throughout, it's to partner with schools. So we're going to watch a video in a minute of, active reading at home. And your child says school, you ask questions about the reading program. Does it include all the skills of reading? How does my child review and practice reading skills? How does my child receive teacher feedback on his reading skills and progress? And all of these things are on, that's on the back of the handout that's happening, the diagram you see on the slide. But it also goes through different questions that you might ask a school or a teacher. But what's important is communicating and interacting often with schools. It's easier when kids are younger than when they're older, but it's still really important to keep, even if it's kind of, emailing and knowing what's happening, because then both the teacher knows you want to be a part of it and also what's going on. So it's important to keep that communication open. And especially to start it at the beginning of the school year. You don't want that phone call in the, because you're like, huh. But if you're communicating often, then it's okay. Then it's just a discussion and you can have and talk to each other. But you also want to discuss literacy instruction and intervention and what's going on and how to do it and how to practice the skills at home. And you can address any concerns together. And I think it's really important to keep, like I said, to keep that communication up and to be an advocate for your child, because you are the one who knows everything about your child. You know them best. And if something doesn't sit right and you know that something's not quite right, or your child's not reading as well, or you just kind of have a sense that things are, talk to the teacher. Talk to the school and say, I just don't think things are going as well as I'd hope they would be. Why is my child struggling? You know best, and you have every right to ask that your child be tested and to find out if there's any problems going on. So really remember that. And I found out my daughter was dyslexic in high school, and it took a lot of advocating and pushing, but we got it done. And she then learned, it made her feel better as well. So it's important to just keep the communication up. So you want to remember the things, how can I support my child's language and literacy goals? All of these things that are here. And those are great questions to review when you're going through things. So can't say enough, be a partner. So this video shares some ideas on how to actively read with your child at home. And it's about
So you care for a
3
child,
minutes.
a son,
Do we have
daughter,
time?
maybe a sibling or a grandchild. Maybe even an entire classroom of children. It's fun, rewarding, and oh my gosh, sometimes really overwhelming. It's hard to keep up with all the do's, don'ts, must-haves, and don't even get me started on all the opinions on the internet. We know reading is important to children's development, but what you might not know is the difference between reading to kids and reading with them. It's called active reading, and it works with children 6 months to 6th grade, and you can do it anywhere. Riding the bus, during snack time, or morning drop-off, waiting for food to be delivered at a restaurant, before bedtime. It only takes 15 minutes to have an impact. Here's how it works. Just remember ABC. A, ask questions. The kind that start a conversation about the book. Questions that begin with words like what, how, who, and why. You can start before you even open the book by asking, look at the cover and title. What do you think the story will be about? Or once you're reading, say, tell me about what's happening on this page. What do you think will happen next? Open-ended questions engage kids in books and gets them talking and thinking about them. Next, the B of the ABCs of active reading. Build vocabulary. Learning new words would help kids become stronger readers. You can help children identify new words by asking what words mean. For example, you might ask, what's a beverage? And you can connect words with pictures by asking questions such as, who is drinking the beverage? And connect new words to those they already know by saying something like, a beverage is a type of drink, like the milk you have every morning. You can also act out the book by using facial expressions, sounds, or movements to show them what the words mean. For example, don't just say the word whisper. Actually whisper as you say it. Finally, the C of the ABCs of active reading. Connect to kids' worlds. Relate the book to things children already know to help them learn more about the world around them. For example, you might pick a moment in the story and say, tell me about your favorite thing to do in the park. Or if you're reading a book about the weather, you might say, it's raining on this page. Do you remember when it was raining? What do you like to do when it's raining? Yes, jump in puddles. Can you see anyone jumping in puddles in this picture? That's it, the end. A, ask questions. B, build vocabulary. And C, connect to kids' worlds. Active reading for just 15 minutes, just 3 times a week, makes a huge difference in children's language development and reading abilities. And when you make it a part of your day, it becomes a fun and rewarding habit that you and the children you care about enjoy and look forward to. For more examples, questions, and resources on active reading, visit readcharlotte.org. Open books, open opportunities. Start engaging in active reading today to give kids the tools they need to be strong readers and begin a lifelong love of reading.
Well, they summed up pretty well a lot of the things I've said throughout, which is great. But active reading is really important because it gets it really gets the children thinking and learning new words and connecting, and which helps the reading comprehension. So all those things are really important. That pretty much concludes what I wanted to say. So there's a lot of things in the NCIL resource repository. So if you have any more information you want to find out about other things, it's a great website and resources for you to have. I recommend kind of going through there. And then Amy's going to mention this.
Yeah, I got a couple things I'm going to mention. One is that I'm going to launch a poll, folks. For anybody that's been in an ECAC webinar before, you know that we have to collect data on how we're doing. So I am going to go ahead, launch a poll that will show up for the attendees. Quick poll, so just ask that you would just answer these 5 questions. We do have a couple comments or questions in the chat and the Q&A, but yes. I am, tomorrow I'm going to send out a follow-up email that is going to include all of the resources and links that we already put in the chat, the glossary that Beth mentioned, and some of ECAC's, some of our own materials. And so we actually years ago, in partnership with the North Carolina State Improvement Project, created a series of documents. And some are, one was questions parents can ask about reading improvement. One was, questions parents can ask about spelling. We've had one on writing, we have one on math, and we have one specific to dyslexia. So I'm going to bombard you guys with these emails with all kinds of resources, tools for you to have in your toolbox, whether you're here as a parent or here as an educator, things that you can share with families or things that families can do at home. And I just wanted to echo, Beth, what you said, how important it is for the partnership between families and schools. If you're here as a family member and your child is struggling with reading, absolutely encourage you to reach out to the school to ask those questions. I can tell you in the parent center world, some of the frustration that we hear is families that have made the ask or have reached out and have been told, oh, well, we're already doing some things, or maybe not being told exactly, but feeling like they're being given the wait and see or wait to fail approach. And there's frustration in that. If you have a kiddo that's been on tier interventions for a long, 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 long time, and we're not seeing the gap close between where they're at and where they need to be, that would be cause for concern. And parents can request a special education evaluation at any time. Those interventions do not need to have occurred before you do so. They're part of that evaluation process. And then if you're here as an educator, just kudos and shout out to you. We need more of you folks. We could, families. My son is 28, has autism, served under an IEP for a specific learning disability in reading, writing, and math. And I was thinking about this, Beth, before we started. I was like, how did my kids learn to read? I know I didn't teach them to learn how to read. I think sometimes we underestimate ourselves as parents, but then looking at some of these things, I was like, I did do some of that, and I did do some of that. So sometimes I think it can be intimidating, but certainly there's so many things that families do at home, and maybe not even realizing like that's helping with this skill. I do see one of the Q&As was, as an educator, how to help students read when parents struggle with reading themselves and are not able to participate in helping their child practice.
Well, that's where I mentioned the wordless picture books are a really good way to do it, because it allows the conversations and the vocabulary to be introduced and to share a story. And they still can ask the questions about the pictures that relate to their knowledge and to their backgrounds and what they're doing. So there are different ways to do it. Or, just start them with slightly easier books and that would fit with the parent. It's just making sure the parent doesn't feel bad about their own reading abilities. And maybe if you know of adult education programs to point them in that direction to help them to learn to read, or a family literacy program where they can learn part of what they're learning to read, they help the child learn to read. And so it's kind of a partnership when they're both learning to read. But if that's not true, that can't happen, or it doesn't happen, then wordless picture books are a really good way to start and to get the conversation going. Or have the child read to the parent too, that's okay.
I was at an IEP meeting once for a high schooler, and she was really struggling. And we were at the IEP meeting, and they're shuffling papers and all this stuff, and the dad, he got really teary-eyed, and he says, you have to understand, he said, all this stuff you're giving to me, he says, I have no idea what it says.
Yeah.
He's like, that's why I'm here, because, I'm 50 something years old, and I was passed grade to grade, and I cannot read. And that's what I don't want, to happen to my daughter. And so
kudos to him.
Yeah, that was heartbreaking. Yeah, it really, truly was.
I think there's a lot of stigma and embarrassment of not knowing how to read as adults. So, which is just what it is. But yes.
I see that a lot of folks, some are having some struggles with their own child right now and frustration with the school. And I know we're about to run out of time. And so please feel free to reach out to our parent educators, because that's where they can provide that individual assistance and help you, navigate that space, prepare for meetings. Sometimes we even go to meetings. There's only a handful of us, and we do serve all 100 counties, but we are there to support families in their advocacy. Let me see some other things that are in here. Some folks feel like their child is regressing or has stopped making progress. And if you have a student with an IEP, that's definitely warrants an IEP meeting. It's either the goals we set were not appropriate, or the goals are fine, but the school's not doing what they need to do with the intensity or frequency, or it's not the right thing to do. Folks need to get back to the table. I know a lot of folks are inquiring about receiving a certificate of attendance, and some had emailed ahead of time asking that, and I'm happy to provide that. I put my email in the chat. And you'll get the email tomorrow from ECAC. So actually, I started to put it in the chat and I didn't hit send. But that's my email address, and I can make sure that you get that certificate of attendance. And we've got
Yes.
3 more that we're going to be doing with Beth. I think
Yeah,
we might
I
have
had the slide up.
Yes. Okay,
Those
perfect.
Those are the 3. Next is how reading typically develops, then why the children might struggle to read, and signs of risk of reading difficulty. So they're coming up every month for the next till May. We'll be doing it. So I hope you guys can attend, but I think there'll be, it's the same kind. It's rich information. And if you have, my name is here if you need to get hold of me as well, which is fine. But it's been a pleasure. I hope I've helped everyone out.
Thank you, Beth. We are
Thank
so
you.
appreciative. Forward to the next ones. We are going to post a recording on YouTube probably
Yay.
tomorrow afternoon. Follow-up email out tomorrow. We appreciate all of you that joined us tonight, and
Thank
I
you.
hope everybody have a great evening. So thank you, Beth, and we'll see you next month. And I hope the rest of you will join us as well.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Good night.